Okay, it says we are live. Let's let's head back over to the panel room so we could see our. Right, perfect. Let me mute us, and we should be good. We have 5 people waiting to see us. All right. I guess just testing the mics. If you guys can hear us, either in the Discord chat or the YouTube chat, feel free to just post a message. Just say hi, and we will get started once we have a lot of people ready to go. We have 4 people. Okay, we lost a viewer. Oh no. Wait, let me actually retweet this for people. All right. Actually, let me just quickly grab a screenshot of this so everyone knows we're ready to go. Then I will tweet it out. Hello, everybody. I guess welcome. We are waiting for everyone to join the stream, and then we will get started in about a minute. Oh, did you see what we were doing last night in the Jackbox with the Rift ponies? Oh god, I'm surprised TJ hasn't told you. He said he would. So, wait, I guess we are alive still. Oh no, we had to come up with a word for. I think the word was flimming. Like we had to come up with a definition for that, and then we had to come up with a synonym. And I can't. Okay, we're not talking about this on this live stream. We'll do it after. All right, everybody. Hello, welcome to So You Want to Be a Con Artist, a panel I have been hosting for many, many years now. I think, this has been over a half a decade of me doing this panel. I'm your host. I'm known as Chocolate Pony in the Pony fandom, or Transformative outside. I'm also known as an Animorphs in the furry fandom. I've been doing this panel for many years now. In fact, I was thinking of retiring this version of the panel and redoing the panel because a lot of the information I have ended up changing as cons and fandoms have been evolving. But since this is a unique situation, we're at an online con for BabsCon, a con that I was originally supposed to be a community guest at, and my co-host Midnight was one of the design people for. I thought this might be a great way to retire this version of this panel, before I do a new one, since it's never really been recorded well. We tried recording this panel many times, and it just never worked out. So why not wrap up this panel with this final presentation here at BabsCon Online. So, as I said, I'm your host, Chocolate Pony, and I'm joined with someone who has been gracious enough to be at this panel in person many times in the past, so welcome back. Oh yeah, my favorite con artist is Nick Wilde. Now we got the con artist jokes out of the way, let's get started. All right. So I'm going to brush off all the normal introductions and let's go straight into the nitty gritty of the panel. So I organized this panel originally based on how I would approach this if I started for my first time vending at cons. So we're going to go over that in a somewhat chronological order. So basically, I've been vending for about 7 years now. I think I officially started vending in 2013, and by 2014, 2015, I started vending enough that it's officially become a full-time job for me, and in fact it's been my only job. So situations like this year where the coronavirus is happening really is hurting my income, but we'll make it through. How long have you been vending for? Oh wow, so before me. You were at the first 2012 BronyCon? Good. Okay. Yes, 2015, 2012 are two very similar dates. All right. Oh, really? Oh, let's check. Um okay, talk again. Ooh. Oh, I'm just talking to myself. Okay, let's fix this. All right, let's fix the audio for you. All right, I'm just going to keep on talking until we get this fixed. Let's see. Properties, device.
Might be yeah, you might have to add a sound device for desktop audio.
All right. Are you talking? Can you guys hear her now? Hello?
Hello, voices.
Just just
Voices.
just talk about Flim and Flam for ages.
Flim and Flam. So the two greatest ponies in existence. I mean, even more so than ponies, they transcend. They are entities, creatures from another realm, things that we can only imagine, but they're truly too good for us.
Okay, are you guys hearing her talk about Flim and Flam? Please say yes
If
or
I'm
no.
talking about anything else, it doesn't count. It's got to be Flim and Flam,
Okay.
the two greatest characters in existence.
Okay. I guess people are saying they hear you
Yay!
now. Yeah, there's a delay. I think there's like a 30-second delay between us streaming and you guys hearing us, so it's kind of hard to get everything. All right, so let's
Okay.
let's start with free introductions again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to So You Want to Be a Con Artist. My name is Chocolate Pony in the Pony fandom. You guys might also know me as Transformative outside that fandom. I've been vending for many years now. This is a panel I've been doing at many, many cons for over half a decade. I started vending back in 2013, and now I vend as a full time job. So situations like this with coronavirus, yeah, are really putting us vendors in a hurtful position. So hopefully you guys help us out and shop out with our online stores. With that, I'm joined with my guest who's been able to grace us at previous panels. She's been able to sit in and be a part of my panel for some past events. So I thought I would bring her back for this one. So introduce yourself, Midnight.
Hello. I am Midnight Premiere. I've been a convention artist since 2015, at vending since 2015. I've been doodling horses since 2012, and yeah, it's been just a crazy fun ride.
All right, perfect. So if you guys don't know, I've been doing this panel for about half a decade now. I was thinking about retiring this panel since a lot of information in it has become out of date as cons have evolved over the last half decade. But with this unique situation of BabsCon being a online con this year because of the coronavirus, I thought it might be a interesting situation to do this as my farewell panel since we've never officially had this recorded well. So hopefully we'll send off this panel in a nice way for all of you guys out there. So I guess talking about this panel, I've divided it into certain categories that I wish I knew when I started vending at cons. So we're going to hope to give you some tips and tricks about vending at conventions for your first time. So we're going to start off by saying that we're going to already assume you're artists and that you already know how to draw art because this isn't an art panel. But we're trying to help artists who've never sold their art before get into the game and kind of know the ins and out of vending from a business perspective, from an administrative perspective, from a marketing perspective, and hopefully this will help you out. So we're going to assume that you guys are already creative, and the next thing we want you guys to look at is organization. Organization is going to be the most important thing you're going to have to do. If you're vending for fun, that's great. But then once you start vending at, let's say, 3 or 5 cons a year, then it starts kind of becoming like a secondary job for you. And at that point, you're going to need to start treating it as a secondary job. If you do this as like a hobby, then you don't have to worry too much about it. But once you get to a point where you start getting income from this, that you have to start reporting on taxes, that's when you should start treating it like a job. And that's when organization is going to be a very, very big key for you. So we're going to go over the things that you should be look out for. But just know that you have to be your own boss in this case. You have to motivate yourself to draw. You have to know when you have free time to draw, whether you need to dedicate that time to drawing stuff that you need to sell at cons versus when you need to draw when you're drawing for fun, which kind of becomes a tricky issue as artists. Whether you draw for fun or whether you draw for work. So just realize you're going to be your own boss and you have to really, really start being organized. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you have to really learn discipline. It's a huge difference, astronomical when you are just drawing for fun. You can pick up a pencil anytime you feel like it. You know, if you get bored, you can do something else. You can go at your own pace, draw what you want, and then, you know, from that to actually working full time or part time as an artist, convention or otherwise, you know, suddenly you can't just put down your pencil and go do something else. You have to stay within deadlines. You have to get something submitted at a certain time. You need to know what paperwork to file. You know, you become a one man band, and it is much more intense than some normal, desk jobs can be.
I'm going to start saying that you're going to get to a point where your sketchbooks are going to be start filled are going to be filled with inventory lists. So if you guys, these are some of my just some photos of some of my sketchbooks and notebooks, and as you can see, it's nothing but inventory now. It's just I don't even sketch and draw as much as I do anymore. It's all just layouts for booths and how much inventory I have. So just know that you're going to have to start getting organized. Having everything on a PowerPoint sheet is important. And that actually leads us to the next topic we're going to discuss is networking and organization with others. So if you guys never vended before and want to learn how to vend at cons, perfect. You're actually doing this step at least. Networking is very, very important, especially if you are a brand new vendor or have never vended at a con. It's great to network with artists who are experienced and vended with cons before. In fact, for your very first cons, it's highly recommended that you don't vend alone. Try to find someone who has experience vending at cons before, partner with them, see how they set up their booth, see why they're doing things, see how they make sales, and learn from that. If you aren't able to go to a con in person and network with people at first, you could do it online. There's a lot of Facebook, Discord, used to be Skype groups when Skype was around, but there's a lot of Facebook and Discord groups and forums where artists go and help network with each other. In fact, it's really, really great when you do this because a lot of people help out each other, notifying artists, hey, Odacon's opening applications on this day, or if an artist wants to do a lanyard and it might be too expensive to do lanyards by themselves, they might find other artists doing group orders. Say, hey, it's only $1 per lanyard if you get on in and on this. So it's a great way to start getting situated with the convention scene, especially if you don't know where to get manufactured products, don't know where to print stuff, don't know which cons to apply for. Joining these groups will be really, really great for helping you network.
Definitely agreed. Yeah, I'd say that the biggest thing that you can do when you are at a physical convention, you know, whenever the next one might be, is to go around the vendor hall and just talk to people because that is the greatest asset is being able to know somebody. Being able to know people is how, for example, I'm on this panel is because I know Chaco. Being able to share experiences, to share tips is really based on who you know. I mean, so many opportunities that I've gotten in this fandom has just been, hey, I appreciate you as an artist and I want to share this with you. Just, you know, come join my little order or uh, come join this experience with me, join this panel, join this vendor booth. And it's insane how much different that can be in contrast to if you just, don't take those opportunities presented to you.
Perfect. Yeah. So I guess one part of networking which is important is it's helping you with your research. So if you're new at con, or assuming since this is an online Brony convention that you are going to be wanting to vend at pony cons, but there might be other cons you want to start branching out to. So know your strengths. what you want to sell, and then find a con that works for your strength. So, for example, if you have like your own original webcomic and you want to sell your own original art, stuff that's not fan art, because fan art sometimes take up a lot of sales. So, if you want a con that you could focus on your original stuff, Comic Cons are a really good place for that. In fact, most Comic Cons don't allow people to sell fan art unless they're working on that licensed property. So Comic Con Artist Alleys are a perfect place for you to start selling your indie comic or collected web comics and your own original stuff. On the other hand, if you do like selling fan art, anime cons were founded on the concept of selling fan art, so you could definitely do that at anime cons. Though some anime cons have been shifting towards wanting you to at least have some original art, so make sure you read the rules for that anime con before you apply for it. Now, if you don't want to worry about having a giant booth for setting up all your stuff, like if you see those towers of prints and wall scrolls and dothies and don't want to worry about all that stuff, if you just want to have a simple notebook, a simple sketch pad, and just do on-site drawings and commissions, then furry cons are the perfect place for that. In fact, most furry cons, they have an artist alley and they sell their tables by the day, half a table, where you could just plop down, have your notebook, and do quick on-site commissions for people who like having their personas drawn. So that's a perfect place to do that. And if you don't even want to worry about the entire selling scene and just have, like, let's say a few original oil paintings or a piece of armor that you made or a piece of cosplay or a quilt that you made, sci-fi cons are really great for that because they have art shows and art auctions where you could just have your art hung up, enjoy the con, and then come back and see how much sales you made. So that's a really good place to do that. So again, knowing the type of art that you're doing will help you better choose which cons you want to vend at. And if you do decide to start drawing fan art, remember your legal rights for vending at these cons. So there are some situations where, of course, it might be considered transformative. I have another panel on that. It's called Transformative Art, if you want to focus on that. But in most cases, most fan art is technically in a gray area closer to illegality. There are some franchises like the My Little Pony franchise where Hasbro kind of gives a blind eye to the pony cons and pony vendors. But then there are other cons and IPs that are more harsh on that. So Nintendo and Harry Potter, for example, are really aggressive of protecting their IPs, so know what is okay. Also, tracing is a big no-no. Do not go and trace someone else's art. I also know a lot of people who do something called splatter art, where they get someone else's art and they just do some filters on it, and that's also a big no-no. So know your rights if you do want to get into fan art, and also remember, each state has a different law. Each convention center has its own law. So, for example, the Hyatt, where BabsCon is held, we're not allowed to sell stickers. There's a rule against selling stickers there. So, while stickers might be a big seller for you, there are some cons where you might not be able to sell stickers. Some people might also want to sell little things like treats and candies. Maybe they make their own candy. Maybe they make their own food. And there's a lot of convention centers that have rules where you're not allowed to sell food because they already have a license with a contracted food vendor. So know all this stuff ahead of time before you start applying for these conventions.
Agreed, definitely. With things, the type of merchandise that you get is really important because you have to know what will sell, what will sell now versus, back in 2015. Because, back when Brony was at its peak, BronyCon had what, 15,000 people.
Yeah.
um, Everything was just flying off the shelves. You could stamp something on your face and you could sell it. You could get a rock outside, put it in a plastic bag, and it would sell. Whereas nowadays people are very particular. Everybody's remarking, "Oh, I no longer have wall space. I no longer have this. I already have art from this artist." So it's something that you have to really keep up to date with.
I think that I definitely remember that. I remember when Prince, when I first started vending at the cons, not just the pony cons, but the anime and comic cons. Prints used to be a big thing. Those 11 by 17 prints used to be like popular, and all of a sudden it hit a point where everyone already had prints, so they don't want prints, so everyone had to shift to wall scrolls, and then those sold out. So it's
Mhm.
like it's a cycle of learning what you need to sell, which I think we'll get into when we get into the merchandise part. But I guess going back to the cons, So if you guys don't know, I'm writing a history book on conventions. I've also do con history panels. In fact, if you guys want to know more updates on that, just visit con history on Twitter at con history. I've been working on a few timelines of different cons, showing the evolution of different cons from the science fiction con scene, the comic con scene, anime and furry cons. And basically, it's just to show you that each major metropolitan area, it doesn't matter where you live in the United States, should have at least these types of cons. And each of these types of cons normally have very consistent attendees. So the smallest types of cons are normally going to be your fan-specific cons, like the Brony and Star Trek conventions. And these are going to be really, really small, normally in the hundreds to low thousands. When you go a little bit higher up from there, you'll have your furry cons, which are normally in the low thousands, and your science fiction cons, which are normally in the 2 to 5,000 range. When you get a little bit higher, you get your anime and comic cons, which normally are at the 10,000 to 30,000 attendee range. And finally, you're going to have your largest cons, which are the multimedia cons that include all different genres. So, for example, Awesome Con is the multimedia con for the Baltimore, D.C. area, but San Diego Comic Con will technically be that for the San Diego area. Even though it's called San Diego Comic Con, it's now technically a multimedia con. So you don't. So if you're worried about having to travel far to do these different conventions, don't worry about that. Most major metropolitan areas will have each of these types of cons. So I'm just going to gather 4 different types of cons and kind of show you the attendance. So just looking through the research, so if you look at the Dallas area, the Chicago area, and the Atlanta area, aside from Atlanta, which doesn't have its own pony convention, each of these conventions do have their own Brony, furry, anime, and multimedia con at least in one point in time. And you can see that they fall under very, very consistent numbering across the board. So if you want to know the attendance, make sure to look that up. But these types of cons should be in every single location and area. So that leads to the next point. You now know the cons you want to apply for. What cons do you want to apply for? So how are you going to start applying for cons? Well, again, like we were saying with organization, have your deadlines ready to go, everything ready in a timely manner, and then look up what type of application system your con is going to be using. There are 3 main types of application processes. There is the first come first serve, the vetted or juried method, and the lottery method. Now, some cons are now evolving to a hybrid approach, but for the most part, each of these cons use one of these 3 systems, which I guess we'll go over each of these systems. So the first method is called the jury or the vetted method. This is the original method. Most cons, when they were founded, started using this system. This was because most cons were either comic cons and sci-fi cons, and they catered to inviting professionals to their event. So you had a lot of people who were basically comic cons. The artist alley were a way to get like guests of honor without having to pay them as guests of honor, but still have big name recognition for people to come to their con. So normally these artists would be vetted in a juried system to see who would be the most appropriate artist to that they could print on flyers and promotional ads and get people to come to the con. So a lot of these cons start using this system. Now, for the jury and vetted method, is normally based on portfolio. So there's 2 instances for this. One, do you have experience vending at cons? If so, what is your experience? And the other hand is your art. So maybe you never vended at a con before, but if you have fantastic art, which would be marketable to that type of audience, they will try to pick you if you have a good portfolio. So apply to these cons when you think your portfolio is strong and looking good. So don't worry about applying for these juried cons the second they open. For most part, most jury cons have about a month of time for their applications. So make sure your application or your gallery is very strong when you apply. The issue that these cons normally lead to is a lot of times the volunteers can be overwhelmed with going through these applications. So this can often lead to favoritism. So there have been instances where cons that use this method will find a way to get like their family and friends consistently getting booths year after year. Like if you talk to a lot of different, if you might notice at some cons you get the same attendees year after year. I think a lot of my friends, for example, who work at Magfest know that the person who runs the dealers for Magfest, the marketplace for Magfest, normally bring their friends there year after year. Um, Also, this might be a way for some cons to do unfair things. Like, let's say one department person doesn't like you or the con chair doesn't like you. They might have a way to subtly blacklist you from the con by just not accepting your application every year, even though you submit it. So this is a method that has been called out by people who are applying for perceived bias, and for people who actually run these cons as being overwhelmed, because a lot of these people are unpaid volunteers. So because of this, by the 90s, when anime cons started coming to prominence, this shifted to a first come first serve system. So anime cons, like I said, a lot of these people are fan artists. These aren't professional artists. So when you're now focusing with fan artists, it has a very, very different system. So the idea behind the first come system originally was, okay, we were assuming that the people who want to vend the most gung ho people will apply the second these applications open, and that'll be good. Now, back in the day when these applications were done by snail mail and or faxing or done by the slow email method, this is kind of a fair system. You'll assume the people who really want to vend at the con will be the first to apply. Nowadays, when you have people applying like the millisecond applications open, it becomes very, very unfair. So, for example, I'm going to show you my application for Anime Expo last year, where I had an atomic clock running, actually 3 different atomic clocks running to make sure that they all had the accurate time. I timed how fast my web browser will refresh, and also did some automatic refreshing so I could see when these applications open. And as you can see, the moment it hit 12, all the applications were already gone. So within 10 seconds, all applications were done. So I've been applying for Anime Expo since 2013. So that's about 7 years applying for Anime Expo. You know how many times I got in this application system? 0 times. That's how bad the first come first serve application system. And because Anime Expo is the largest anime con in the United States, a few annoyed vendors is not going to really get to them. They have a lot of people who want to vend. There's not going to be fear of people boycotting the con, so they're going to keep the system. But this is a way to show you how unfair the system is. Another example is Megaplex, my local furry con here in Orlando, Florida, where last year I applied, I think, within 5 hours and got a table. This year I applied the second application's open. I got my application done in a few minutes, and I still wasn't able to get a table, even though I was able to get a table within 5 hours last year. And this year I applied the second it opened and wasn't able to get a table. So that kind of shows you how bad the first come system is. Most cons have admitted to try to move away from it. Now, tips for applying for a first come system is, like I said, use atomic clocks so you know that your timing is correct. Some cons have a practice form like Furry Fiesta, so you know exactly what needs to be filled out. And if you know what needs to be filled out, try to have it handy. Instead of typing in your email, your mailing address, have it ready to be copy and pasted into the form as it goes. Sometimes, if you're lucky, your Google autofill will help, and it should do that. But there's really no way to get to help you with this. So just try to copy and paste as best as possible. Because of these two con systems being kind of considered unfair, a lot of cons started moving to what's called a lottery system. It's like what it sounds. It's supposed to be more fair so the volunteers don't have to worry about it. And for other vendors, it doesn't seem like there's a bias between it. But again, it's based purely on luck. So for example, Otakon, I've been applying for Otakon for the last 8 years. I only got through their lottery system once. One time out of the 8 years I've been applying for Otakon. That's so sometimes the odds can really, really be against you. For the lottery system, there's sometimes no way to get around that. Most cons, if you submit your applications twice, you're automatically rejected from the lottery pool. Some cons might be fair and they'll allow you to apply as a studio. Like if you have a group of friends who want to play as an art studio, you can submit one application for that and another application as an individual vendor. But it's still a tricky application system. So most cons have shifted to a more hybrid approach, but for the most part, these three systems will be the cons application systems you will be using. I guess any words on that for you?
I am most familiar with just the juried system because that's kind of the default for PonyCons, and it is definitely got really obvious highs and lows. For me, my experience, I have had uh, as someone who's both, of course, applied and gotten into conventions, to PonyCons, and as someone who has known people that have worked on the vendor hall. I was actually part of one of the convention's jury system. Like, I was part of, I sat in and I heard what these several people, the con chair, the vendor lead, had to say about, the different vendors. Um, and what you do gets around. So people that strike up a lot of drama, people that are unpleasant to work with or be around, are automatically, looked at distastefully.
Yeah.
Less, they have less of a chance of getting in. Some people have been outright just, put in the ice box because they are a very bad person to work with. They've gotten a lot of complaints. So on the one hand, it gets you in. Uh, it
Sometimes
it
it's fair. Like,
depends
yeah.
on, yeah.
Like,
It gets affected if you're a good person,
like
basically.
there's for example, I guess if you guys were listening to the last panel where I was helping run the first BabsCon, there was a vendor who I guess a lot of you know in the fandom. I'm not going to name this individual, but this person causes a lot of drama and is actually very rude to other vendors. Because of that, I suggested they shouldn't be welcome back to the con, and a lot of cons end up banning this person from their con. Um, and he shifted to vending at another genre's cons. I noticed and then the other people, when the word got out, started like kind of blacklisting him from the con. But I noticed it's the other way around. So, for example, there's a furry con, and I'm not going to name the city, but he's very good friends with the people who run that con. And because he thinks I was responsible for having him banned from a lot of pony cons, I think he talked to them about not welcoming me back at that con. So there's one furry con that doesn't want me because I guess he talked bad about me to them. So again, it could be fair both ways. So it's just a tricky system, and hopefully it works out in the end.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
yeah, we try to get through all the panels. So let's get to the next part, traveling and stuff. Because like I said, I live in Orlando, but before that, I was in Tallahassee, I was in Austin, I was in Dallas, I was in Frostburg, I was in Baltimore. So I lived all across the United States at different points in time. And I'm not going to be, even if I do all the local cons when I was in Baltimore, that was a blessing. There's a lot of good cons by me, but for the most part, I'm going to need to travel to cons. So this is what you're going to start needing to think about when you start vending at more cons. You're going to start looking at, oh, should I just do local cons, or do I need to start doing long distance cons? When I start doing long distance cons, other things start coming into play. So there's a trade-off formula I'm talking about, which is called, it's going to be the how much do you want to pay. It's like the more you pay for travel, the more luggage you can bring. The cheaper you want your travel, the less you are able to bring. So I've divided this up by the different types of systems I've been using. So again, a lot, like I said, this is an old panel, and I'm retiring this panel. So a lot of the slides, the prices and dates and information might be a few years old, but I want to at least go through this panel and show everybody what I was going through during these early days of me vending. So the four main methods I've used for travel are bus, train, plane, and car. And if you're a big vendor, like you sell fursuits or something, you might be using a truck or a rental van. But you will notice that the price of the your method of transportation, the more it increases, the more luggage you can bring. So if you don't have that much, you could travel fairly cheap. The more you need to bring, the higher the cost gets. So, for example, when I was living in Austin, Texas, and I need to vend at cons in San Antonio or Dallas, originally I would try to take the megabus. The Megabus or the Greyhound normally is cheap. Sometimes you get a really good deal on it. But the problem is most of these buses, you can't even bring an airport-sized check-in bag for vending. You could only bring one carry-on, and that's really, really restrictive, especially if you see my booth. So at that point, sometimes you might be lucky, and your city and the con you're vending at is on a Amtrak train route, and then the prices get a little bit better. So when I was living in Frostburg, I would take the Amtrak from Frostburg to Baltimore. That only cost me about $35. When I was living in Austin, I would sometimes take the train from Austin to Dallas, and that cost me about $20. At that point, you could bring on one carry-on and one check-in bag. Now, if you need to bring more on, the price again goes up a little bit higher. So in my early days, I started using Southwest, and Southwest is really, really great because they allow two check-in for free and two carry-on bags. So once I got to the point where I had too much luggage that I couldn't even use a bus or a train, I started shifting to flying with Southwest from Austin to Dallas. Even though it's about like what 2 hour car ride, I would still do that because I could bring in more luggage. At that point, the cost of the airline ticket was worth it to bring that extra luggage. Now, if you can't fit everything in that luggage, if you have your own car, that's great. I don't have a car, so I sometimes have to borrow a roommate's car. But you could bring as much as your car can fill. And this is really great for some cross-country trips. The only issue is now you have to now worry about the price of gas and if you stop for any hotels along the way. So that brings the price up. And if you need to bring more, then you can rent a truck, but then that includes all that costs. So again, that's the formula. You want to bring more, it's going to cost more. You want to pay less, you're going to bring less. So what methods have you been mostly using for yourself?
I have been using Southwest. Absolutely, it has ruled my life. Having those two free bags under 50 pounds, you can carry uh, two big suitcases with you. So what I would do and what I've done is, hey family, you want to come with me, have a vacation? Also, I'm going to need you to fit your clothes in a little space so I can use a second 50-pound bag for my merchandise. So my family has, they love traveling, they love going to conventions, and it's pretty easy to just, sneak along an extra 50-pound bag for extra
Yeah,
merchandise.
I think that's a good point. Everyone, I use Southwest. I think a lot of vendors use Southwest. The only issue was when I moved to Tallahassee, there was no Southwest, so I had to like start using the expensive Delta, which was one of two airlines available to me. But sometimes you will, if you use an airline long enough, you'll get reward programs. So since I couldn't fly Southwest, I used Delta for a year, and within that year, I was able to get silver, gold, then platinum. And with my platinum status, not only was I able to get the two free bags that Southwest had, I was able to get three free bags at 70 pounds. So I was able to bring a lot more. So
Ooh.
if you fly with, I guess the tip is fly with one specific airline, even if the price for that airline might be more expensive for some trips. If you stick consistently with one airline, you might be able to travel enough that you get status with them, and at that point, you were able to bring more stuff. So, and then I guess the other tips are once you start vending at your first few cons, you'll notice something selling for you. I'm sure most people, when they start vending at cons, are going to do the same, try to sell the same thing everyone else sells. They're going to try and want to sell prints, they want to sell postcards, they want to sell stickers, they want to sell buttons, they want to sell lanyards, they want to sell whatever the popular thing is. Once you start going to enough cons, you're going to notice a few items start overtaking your other sales, and then some items barely selling. So, for example, I think by about my third or fourth BronyCon, I noticed that some items were making me at least 75% of my sales, while prints, which used to be a really good selling items, barely made me a sliver. I was barely even 5% of my sales for that BronyCon. Same with buttons. So once you start seeing things barely selling, you could weed it out. So, for example, prints take up a lot of space on your booth. They take up a lot of display space because prints are very, very heavy because you have stacks of cardboard paper you have to carry with you. It adds a lot of weight for your plane. So once I was able to weed out prints, instantly I had that extra weight that I could use freed space in my luggage for other items that were selling more, and then I could dedicate the space on at my booth that prints used to take up for other stuff. So start doing that. Start seeing which items are making you money and start weeding that out. And you'll notice sometimes over even different, very different cons, you'll notice a lot of consistent sales. So, for example, this is BabsCon, which is, you could say, is a mid-sized BronyCon. Everfree, which is a larger size BronyCon, and then Crystal Fair, which is a small size BronyCon. You'll notice that I have 5 items that make me at least 75% of my sales. And even though I sold different amount of these items across these 3 cons, they all consistently made me 75% of your sales. So once you see figures like that, start focusing on those items and really expand on that. And then over time, you'll be able to find a signature item. I guess what you were talking about, like merchandise and stuff, which I think we could get on now. So once you start seeing an item that's selling a lot for you, start shifting to that item. Be known for that one signature item. So, for example, when I got started in vending at the PonyCons, everyone knew me for my tarot cards. So I would put the tarot cards in the name of my booth and eventually my business card. And even though they might have some cons where they stopped selling since everyone started buying my tarot cards, I would still actively promote the tarot cards because that's what people know me for. For example, one of our friends, My Little Ties, run by Igor, even though he doesn't really sell ties that much anymore, he was still known in the old days of the pony fandom for selling ties. So his name brand is still My Little Ties, and he still has ties at his booth because it's a great way to get promotion. Now, if you don't have a unique item that people know you for, maybe you might have a unique art style people know you for. Like Midnight, you have a very, very unique art style that stands out. So people are going to be attracted to that. So start trying to use that unique style to go across all your different items. And
Yeah, it's definitely I think you have a really good system of just how you lay things out as well. Because one more thing that really adds to how you sell is not just, you know, the logistics, but the aesthetic. So when people go by your booth, what they see is what they expect to get. What they see is their, you know, their experience. It's
yeah,
like when you see a commercial or an advertisement online, you'll see these happy smiling faces. You'll see these comfortable colors because that's they're trying to relay the experience that they want you to have using their product or visiting their website. So yeah, things like posters, they may not sell, but they provide a really nice aesthetic. And I think with you, you have a great medium because your merchandise is really innovative, and at the same time, it's very aesthetic. So you've got those beautiful flags, you've got the the different mats and things and the badges, and it really even the way you lay it out to a T, it brings it all together.
yeah. I think we'll talk about that when we get to the setup. But thank you for bringing up that point because like incorporating your art and your merch into your booth setup is very, very important. I guess finishing off this part, for common stuff like prints and buttons, everyone's going to have those. So try to make yours stand out and make it unique. So, for example, if you have holographic prints, that'll stand out a lot more. If you have glow in the dark prints, that'll stand out a lot more from regular ones. Or if buttons, you could do something simple as like putting googly eyes on them, and they'll definitely stand out a lot more. And just don't be afraid to innovate. Like yeah, like you were saying, people know me for my flags and my tarot cards, so that eventually became what I was known for. So I started focusing on that. So again, once you find your signature item, don't be afraid to really push it, and don't be afraid to experiment as well. So for example, this was back when acrylic charms were starting to become popular, and acrylic standees weren't as popular. So I was one of the first to try to get into the acrylic standee game, and I had these at one of the early BronyCons. They didn't sell as much, but that's the risk you're going to have to take. Sometimes you have to experiment into some categories. Now acrylic stands are really, really popular. So sometimes you might start doing something that might not be popular until a few years later. Like I remember when enamel pins weren't even really a thing. Only a few people had enamel pins. Now everyone has enamel pins. So yeah, here's some other charms that I had. The stands, they weren't really as popular. People, it's strange because sometimes people might like your item. Like I posted this on Twitter and everyone loved them, but then very few people buy them. So sometimes you're going to have to take risks. Some things sell, some things might be same popular, but they might not correlate to selling. So yeah, let's get to the topic you were mentioning about the setup. This is actually my favorite part. So if you guys don't know, I studied psychology at Johns Hopkins University, where I studied like the psychology of human brain, specifically neuroscience was the area I was looking at. So I was trying to apply that to my art and my booth setups. So for the longest time, I kind of came up with this formula. It's called maximizing area filled versus maximizing visibility. So you're going to have to take your setup in one of two directions. Do you want to fill your booth with as much items and things as possible? In one hand, that's good because if you have a lot of stuff, you're gonna be able to aim for a larger audience. Someone might just want a pin, for example. Someone might want a button. If you have one of everything, you're gonna have something that everyone wants. So this will be what I call maximizing area filled. Now, the other hand is if you have too much stuff, it might look too cluttered. It's like going to a flea market where everything is laid out area. The human eye tends to like organization more than likes chaos. In fact, you're going to notice the human eye is going to gloss over things that look very, very chaotic. So at this point, you might want to make your booth look really, really nice and beautiful. And that way, you could showcase as much as possible, but easily make the flow beautiful. Like you were saying, it's your booth is like a commercial. You want to make it look nice that it not only attracts the customer, but it's easy on their eyes so they could flow to like the main items and really focus on stuff like that. Let's see. All right. Okay, let's go to the vendor booth. So here are some new artists. This is the first time vending. I met their artists from Towson University, and this is the first Otakon. And you can see they have very, very beautiful art, but it's a little bit chaotic. It's a little bit too much. Now, one thing you'll notice is because everything is kind of haphazard, sometimes the eye is just going to gloss over it. So new vendors normally set up the way they do because they see other vendors do it. They don't normally understand why vendors who are more experienced set up the way they specifically do. So at that point, in the early days of vending, I started looking at what the pros were doing. Now, of course, here's an anime exhibitor's booth. You probably won't get to the point where you'll be displaying this much, but you can see they kind of have some type of system in order. Even though it kind of looks chaotic, there is a system to it. The wall scrolls are very, very high because the wall scrolls have a big visibility area. These things could be seen from a distance. Even though you're looking at these things from a crowd, they're very easy to see, same as the t-shirts. When you get closer to eye level, things like plushies start popping out. And then when you get closer to the browsing level, you have things like figurines and keychains and charms. So I've been trying to adapt this system for when I start displaying my booth. So if you look at, like I was saying, those sketchbooks started to be filled up with like ideas for booths. I tried to apply that same system where I would have large prints and wall scrolls on top that people could see from a distance, and then my main items in the middle, and then smaller items towards the bottom. And you could kind of see how I tried to convert some of these booths over. So you can see these are some of my early attempts at a BronyCon booth, where I had the large wall scrolls there, my tarot cards, which are my main thing, and then these things at the bottom. So the system that I started developing is the top thing, the top level should be what people see when they enter the convention center. Now, the booth display changes depending if you're renting at a hotel or a convention center. But if you're at an area where there's a high ceiling, the first thing people are going to do to avoid the crowds is to look directly up. When you look directly up, people should be able to see what you have at least on the highest level. This is where I like to keep the wall scrolls, and now that's where I keep the flags. Now, when you get closer to eye level, at the human adult walking level, this is where you should have your main products. Since, like I said, tarot cards are my main thing, I kept them at eye level. This is what people will be looking at. And then for browsing level, this is what I call the impulse buy item. These are things that people like handling. So if you notice kids like going and rummaging through little baskets of trinkets and start touching everything, that's kind of the intention that you want. You want things people could kind of flip through and rummage through, especially when it's set up in front of your booth, because that's a great way to get what I call impulse buy items or last minute items. So you can see over time I started slowly evolving. This is the first year I had badges, and I really wanted to promote that I had badges now. So I had these lights so it could attract the people's eyes to these badges. Now, again, make sure to know what your con's like. This is a area where I had my own corner to myself, so I wasn't distracting my vending neighbors. But be considerate of your neighbors. If flashing lights annoy them, then make sure to tone that down. Make sure to know it's not affecting the attendees as well. And then here's back where I'm talking about the impulse buy items, where I have baskets of buttons. So the intention of these are because these are not my main items. People are going to be coming to my booth for other things. So for having at the checkout counter a few $1 to $2 items in front of them, if they're like, for example, buying a $40 card deck from me, they might look down and see, oh, it's a $1 button. Oh, just add it to my order. So this is what I call impulse buy items, and having them nice and handy at a lower level is really, really good for that. Um, but it depends on what these impulse buy items are. So, for example, my main thing are my flags and tarot cards, pins, and other stuff. Buttons are not my main thing. These are an addition people have for my booth. But if you're like this booth right here, where buttons are their main thing, you're going to need to display them as much as possible. Now, going back to my maximizing visibility versus maximizing space, like I said, because buttons are not my main item, I don't need to dedicate a lot of space to them. Therefore, I can compress all my buttons into one tiny basket for people to browse. However, since buttons are their main items, they need to maximize as much space to make the buttons look nice and orderly, so people could see which buttons they have on display and pick the buttons, which buttons they want. So if it's your main item, maximize visibility. If it's not your main item, I would say maximize space. Um, so, for example, tarot cards and badges. Mary Mouse, she's known the furry fandom for having badges. Her badges could be displayed here because people already knew her for badges, unlike myself, where it was my first time vending with badges. I had to really show off the badges because Mary Mouse, she's known for badges. She could compress her badges into a very, very small space for people. And yeah, over time, you're going to start trying to come up with booths. My booth wasn't working, so I kept on over the years trying to come up with different booth designs until I finally figured out what the issue is. I noticed no matter how nice and organized I try to have my booth, there's something not right. Even though I thought I had it orderly, like I said, there's still a little bit of chaos in there. I figured out it's because I had like white grids and grids that people could see through. When people see through it, people could see all this mess behind it. So I started having black grids and put a black cloth and felt behind it so the eye is better grounded. So these badges now stick out better. So again, you guys are artists. Treat your booth as if it's an art piece. Know where the eye flows. Try to make it look as orderly as possible, and let the items in booth flow so that the audience could look at your main items directly. So that's why, as artists, you should be able to come up with booths ahead of time. These are examples of booths I've been trying to come up with before I actually made them into reality. And again, like I said, just go to different cons, look around, and try to see what the professionals are doing and see what you could adapt. So, for example, like I said, high ceiling convention centers, having one giant sign is a great way to attract people to your booth. Also, like for example, Interbane Studios, they have their own unique tablecloths and backdrop. This makes their booth stand out a lot more from the booth that's provided by the Baltimore Convention Center, which normally has the same color of drapes and stuff. Dead and Cute and Deadly, they also have very nice pastel colors, which makes them stand out in this dark hotel room. Another good example is Tasty Peach Studio. They will have the same nice pink pastel. So I took this picture at IkiCon through a crowd, and even though this is a small hotel convention, you could see their booth stands out even if I take the picture through the crowd because they have come up with a nice consistent style. So this is their booth at IkiCon, and then this is their booth at Otakon in the Baltimore Convention Center with the high ceiling. So once you find one booth that works out for you, you could really modify and adapt it to work at many, many different cons. And like Midnight was saying, you could have your art incorporated within the signs like this artist does within the tablecloth as well. This artist is a good example where she has her art not only as prints that are large and can be seen, but also our tablecloths that are hang over. Is that correct? I guess. What have you noticed for your own displays?
Yeah, I find it really fascinating how, like you said, people will subconsciously pick up on things like this, and then they'll try and incorporate things into their own booth, their own setup. But if they don't really get the concept, then it's still noticeable. For example, that booth you showed earlier, there was one where a bunch of shirts are kind of stacked on top of each other.
This one,
Yes.
yep.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. tower of t-shirts, and that's a lot of merchandise. And for me, looking at it, I'm completely turned off by it because it's just chaos. We know they sell shirts, so why don't they do something like, Hot Topic or Walmart does, is they'll fold up the shirt so it basically only shows the design.
Hmm.
Maybe align them by color, because we get the idea that they are selling shirts. We know that. We don't need to see all of that wasted space of all these shirts just strung up like that.
And I
So they're
think you
kind of
start
getting that
seeing
good
that.
idea.
Yeah, like people will
Hmm.
have the designs, just designs of the shirt as giant prints that are hung up from a distance. But that's I guess that's also the thing. Do you want to also showcase the art, or do you want to showcase the product? Because for them,
Hmm.
even from a distance, even though it's chaotic, you know they're t-shirts. But if they, and I don't think they probably have the best designs. A lot of copyright IP they probably didn't have the right to. But they, you know, they're t-shirts, and if you want a t-shirt, you can go to the booth. But if you want a nice design, um, normally t-shirts that are based on design have giant prints of them, and you walk up, oh, what is this? Is this a wall scroll? Is this a print? What is this? You like the design, but when you walk up and you see their t-shirts, like, oh, okay, I guess I didn't want a t-shirt, but I like this design, so I'll buy a t-shirt. So again, it's depending on what item you are trying to market. Do you want to market the item, or you want to market the art style? That also changes, I guess, what you display for your booth.
Hmm. Definitely.
Let's see. Yeah, and then you have a very unique style because your name is Midnight Premiere, so you had yours kind of look like a movie theater, so which is really really cute concept. Wish I had a picture here, but I don't have a picture of your booth. But you have a really cute design that makes it look like a movie theater entrance.
It's really fun. Yeah, it gets people's eye traveling towards the booth.
All right. I guess. Oh, we're okay. We have to wrap up a bit.
Oh,
So let's go to the last part, which people might not have fun with: taxes and deductible expenses. So normally I normally do this panel alone, but recently, if my tax accountant was at the same con I was at, he would join in and do a tax panel, a tax portion for this panel. My tax accountant's also a vendor, very very helpful, and he's able to do taxes for me. So I'm able to give him all my sale information after the con's over, and he's able to file the taxes for me. So it's been really, really great. But a lot of the tips I've learned from him over the years. We'll go through them quickly right here. So if you're vending at cons, make sure to know if you have the right sales license. Some cons might not even let you apply for their con unless you have the right tax information before you apply. So make sure you, before you go to the con, don't walk up there thinking you sell, and all of a sudden they ask you for your California business license and you don't have it on hand, because you won't be able to legally vend at that convention. Some cons just turn a blind eye to it. They just assume you know what to do, and they don't even ask you about taxes, but you still will probably have to do taxes. For example, there are some cons that we do in the Midwest that don't even ask us, even require us to get a tax application, but we are assumed to do these taxes on our own free time. So make sure to know not only the state law, but also the federal law, because each state has a different tax thing. So for some states, you might have to pay your own state sales tax, the sales tax for it, but you also have to pay income tax to the state that you live in, plus federal tax. So there's a lot of different things you have to worry about. And as if you guys are new artists vending for your first time, I would highly recommend you don't even worry yourself about this and hire a tax accountant to help you out for this stuff. Um, some of the things I did learn from doing this is what can be deductible. So most people ask food, travel, and hotel expenses. So for hotel expenses, it's really, really good to keep the receipts. That's going to be the most important thing, keeping your receipts, because if you don't have a receipt, it's going to be hard to prove that you were at the hotel. Most of us vendors, we like sharing rooms. So one person has their name on the hotel, and then they divide the room up by bed space to the other vendors, and people pay them a portion. If you are the person who is renting out the hotel and people are paying you, you have to report all the money that people paid you for the hotel as income. Um, so you can't write off the entire hotel bill as a tax deductible expense. You're going to write off your portion, and everyone else's portion counts as income towards you. However, if you're the person paying that person, make sure you have some type of traceable receipt. So if you pay them on PayPal, make sure you save that invoice. If you pay them in cash, make sure you have somewhere recorded that you pay them in cash, because it's going to be harder to prove that you paid for that hotel for vending. The other thing is, actually, you don't need to keep, you should not really keep receipt for food or gas expenses. So for the first thing, food, most people, for my first few years of vending, I used to save all my receipts, and I realized, oh, I didn't even need to save a receipt because there's a law called per diem for food where there is a maximum amount of food that could be deducted for business trips. I think it depends, I guess, where you live and which state, but it's roughly about $30. So it's easier to write off that one consistent amount for how much you vend. Doesn't matter if you spent more on food or spent less on food. Having one consistent amount that you could pay, that you could write off, is better than keeping track of all your receipts for all your meals you had. The other thing is, people want to also save gas receipts. If they're driving to a con, they might want to save gas receipts. My tax accountant says it's actually better to do what's called a mileage rate for your con as opposed to saving gas receipts, because the consistency between how much gas is burned through how much is driven is very, very hard to keep on calculating. So doing the mileage rate is better. Also, if you're vending, there might be a section, if you're dedicating a section of your house or your room purely to vending and nothing else, you could write off that square footage of your house or room as a business expense, because that's technically now your office space. If you're using your phone for your business as well, if you're taking orders through phone, using phone for social media and stuff, you could probably you can't write off the whole phone bill because you're going to be using your phone for personal use, but you could write off a portion of your phone bill for this stuff. So make sure to have a tax accountant and look it over for you before you start writing this stuff off. But for the most case, if you find the right tax accountant, they can help you write off these things. So yeah. Anything else you want to add?
100% agree.
Yeah.
I think you worded all of that perfectly.
Okay. I guess. Oh, it's already 10 p.m. So I guess we're gonna wrap up this panel. We just want to say, make sure you are a dedicated con artist, know all the laws and rules, because you want to be this type of con artist. You don't want to be this type of con artist because you get a lot of trouble with the IRS. So don't do that. And I guess we apologize because we started this panel a little bit late. We aren't able to take questions and answers, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask the questions in the either the Discord or the YouTube chat, and we could probably take your questions after. You could also message us online so we could give you our questions in total. And with that, thank you very much for joining us for the So You Want to Be a Con Artist panel. I want to thank my co-host Midnight Premiere for joining me for this panel. And do you have anything to plug before we go?
No, just thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah, I actually want to show off this dumb key card she made because it's a BabsCon key card, and she put our pony. So she pasted her head over another pony, so it's the funniest thing ever. But yeah, we are vendors. Go check out the vendor hall. Like I said, this is a panel about how to vend at cons. There's a lot of vendors who are in trouble because of the coronavirus, so make sure to check out their stuff in the digital vendor hall. And with that, thank you very much for joining for our panel, and we hope you have a good rest of your time at BabsCon Online. Thank you very much. Bye.
Woo! Thank you.